We're absolutely delighted to be here. I'm going to start with a brief introduction and then pass the baton to Chrissy for the introduction. But one thing we want to start and end with is our tagline: for patients, by patients, advancing together. This is something we're never losing sight of. And I want to assure you, as a patient myself, and I know Chrissy will chime in, that we are always having the patient first ourselves in mind, whether it's the security, the process, anything and everything that is coming up along it. So without further ado, we'll start the slide deck. Thank you, Chrissy, for sharing your screen. And again, we'll do a short introduction for those who didn't hear our speeches before, but and what we'll be covering today. So in terms of patient registry overview, what to expect, you'll hear what's been done so far, what happens next, and more importantly, how can you help us and how to contact us. So we'll go through each of these, but first a short introduction about myself. Hello, everyone, in however time zone you are. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Alice Rapshin. I'm here in New York, East Coast. So I personally have type 3 severe von Willebrand's disease. I started off with a career in biochemistry, then morphed into software development, and then ultimately as a project manager. And currently I work at a nonprofit company that builds and trains simulators for eye surgery, cataract surgery. But more importantly, me, who am I and what do I represent in the foundation? I'm a member of the sVWD Connect Foundation. I've been at the conferences since 2017, so I feel like a veteran in a good way. And I was at the patient patient representative on the board of directors. So I'm delighted to be here, and it's a very humbling experience and a great opportunity to have been working with Chrissy as well. So that said, I'll pass the baton for Chrissy for her introduction.
Thanks, Alice. I think I know many of you, but for those who don't know me yet, my name is Chrissy Morgenthaler. I am also a type 3 patient. I have been attending the conferences since 2019. I really found the foundation just as my husband and I were deciding to start a family and start trying to have our first child. And I was looking for information, resources, any kind of help I could get, because I was the only patient with type 3 at my HTC, and they didn't know what to do with me and were themselves a little bit worried with the whole prospect of trying to have a family. I found the foundation and these wonderful groups on Facebook, and very last minute before the conference in 2019, found out about the conference. I think it was like a week before the conference happened, frantically contacted Jeanette, had another a foundation member help me, ended up sharing a room, but I got myself there, and that meeting really changed my life. I now have a 15-month-old daughter, and everything is great and fine. So I'm really thrilled to be a part of this effort. My professional background is actually in clinical research. I have worked in a lot of different therapeutic indications. My background initially was all in oncology, so cancer research. And I also did some dermatology studies, inflammation studies, rheumatoid arthritis. And for the last 3.5 years, I've been focusing my time at a small pharma company working on atrial fibrillation, which is a cardiac disorder. So I come at this from the background of drug trials. And drug trials have a lot of regulations that they have to abide by under the FDA and various other regulatory authorities across the world. So I feel like sometimes I come at the patient registry with my regulator hat on, like thinking about being an auditor, and I probably go overboard because the regulations the registry has to abide by aren't as severe or strong or stringent as the regulations that a drug trial does. But I come at it with that mindset. So I really want to make sure that the patients that are participating, the data that we're collecting is secure, kept confidential. And I think we're really going above and beyond in that aspect. So important for everybody to know that. And I think I didn't mention I'm located in the San Francisco Bay Area in California. So it is, I think, still morning for me. So I'm going to just dive into the next slide and introduce the registry to those of you who aren't familiar with it or want to have a refresher. Jeanette did a great job explaining the role of the sponsor, and that is the foundation. So I'll go a little bit more into the registry itself. So you see on my second bullet point here, it is a longitudinal natural history and patient outcome study. What does that mean? To me, that was gibberish as well when I first started, preparing this protocol with the team, since an observational study such as a registry is not something that I'm as familiar with. But if we break it down, a longitudinal study is something that collects data and looks at data over a long period of time. So we're not looking at just a snapshot like one bleed, for example. We really want to know the whole patient's experience over a long period of time. A natural history study is one that's observational. So we're not administering any treatments in this study. We're really collecting information about von Willebrand's disease and about the experience that you and we as patients go through. And then patient outcomes study on that same line is really, this is a very patient-centric registry. There are registries that exist that are really about collecting, how many patients exist, where are they located, and where are they treated? And that's really the bulk of the information that's collected. In our case, patients are the forefront of what we're doing. So we want to know, what is our collective experience and individual experiences? How are we treated? How are we diagnosed? A lot of us have had changes in our diagnosis, myself included. When I was younger, I was told that I was a type 1 severe, but it turns out, and I didn't know this until about 5 years ago, that I'm actually a type 3. And so that the treatments that I was given over my childhood were not effective for me because I didn't respond to them as a type 3. So other information that we're looking at in a patient-centric manner are what other kind of treatments have we experienced or been exposed to? What's our family history like? And maybe most importantly, what is our quality of life? How has having severe von Willebrand's disease really affected you throughout your life? And how does your quality of life change over time as well, depending on the severity of your bleeding or the treatments that you are taking advantage of? And so much more. There will be so much more information that we're looking to learn. And I think one thing to note is as we collect data and learn more about the patient experience, it'll help guide us in developing additional questionnaires and what we're calling modules, where we'll really dive into specific areas such as inhibitors or prophylaxis, reproductive bleeding, things where we know or we'll maybe learn that there's a lot of information to be learned and shared there. So one other thing I wanted to mention about this study is that everything will go through what's called an institutional review board, or IRB. And Jeanette mentioned that in her introduction, but the way this study works is the first thing we have to do is write a protocol. This is a lengthy document that describes everything we're going to collect in the study, all the data we're looking for, how we're going to protect privacy, how we're going to implement the registry and website, when we're going to collect data. Basically, everything you can think about is in that protocol. And there's a number of supporting documents as well that needed to be prepared. All of those documents get submitted to an IRB, and an IRB is an independent committee that reviews research for compliance with ethical guidelines, putting the patient first. Is the patient safety paramount and forefront of that research, their privacy. With regards to the registry, the IRB will be looking a lot at how are we protecting your data, your privacy, your confidentiality. So moving to the next slide. So speaking of confidentiality, there's a few terms you might hear thrown around. One is HIPAA. This is a long acronym. I think it's the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. And I think this went into effect in the mid-90s. And essentially what this law does is define what is your health information, your private health information, and how can that be safeguarded and protected. So it defines things like your name, your address, your lab results, any of these things that can be, identify you and your health status is protected under the HIPAA regulation. So that's one of the things that we have put into our protocol, that we're complying with HIPAA regulations. You'll see that in what's called an informed consent form. If you decide to join the registry, you'll have a document called an informed consent form that will describe everything about the study to you and how your data will be protected and safeguarded. You'll also hear the term an NDA, sometimes also called a CDA. This is a non-disclosure agreement or a confidentiality agreement. And what that is a document that anyone who is touching the registry as a volunteer, a staff member of the foundation, even our vendors. So we have a website developer who's creating this registry for us. All of us sign what's called an NDA, promising that we're going to keep any information safe, private, and confidential. So then along that lines, who can see your data, right? And you'll hear this term coded data sometimes. When a patient joins a study, whether it's a registry or a clinical drug trial, you are assigned an ID number. So in this case, it'll be your participant ID number. And anytime data about within the registry is viewed or shared, it's only ever shared with those coded ID numbers. The only people who can ever see if like your name lines up to your participant ID number, in this case, is Alice and myself. We're restricting that only to the co-principal investigators. Nobody else will be able to identify that data corresponds to you. That is true of any registry staff, foundation members that can see summaries of data. No one will be able to see that that actually corresponds to you individually as a person. With that, I'm actually going to pass it off to Alice. She's going to talk a little bit more about the database itself and how the data is secured there.
Thank you, Chrissy. So as Chrissy mentioned, in terms of security and data, that is the biggest concern when building the registry and the database. We hired a vendor, as Chrissy mentioned, who also signed the NDA along with us as well, that along the process as we're making sure that the data is secured. So the database itself is built on secure network. Also in just being able to obtain the account when the registry is open and the verification process, how it's sent to the email, what's in the email, all those taken into considerations, that the accessibility is very secure and confidential. And how is the data secure? So the developer that we partnered with, he has the certain protocols in place as well. In my experience bringing into database, this is something very first and foremost to take into consideration, but ultimately as keeping in mind that this is by patients and for patients, that we're always making sure that the data points are secure and never compensated. Confidentiality is utmost of importance. Every dialogue we have, we're always going back to, even if a session logout, how is that session retrieved? Is any, or even Chrissy will start talking more about consent forms, how it's printed. Everything leads back to the database and who can access it. So if you also have further questions, we'd be happy to answer them. But I think I'm very certain and rest assured that this is very confidential, and we're treating it as such. Now, the process itself, what to expect. I know we keep thinking about and talking about patient registry, but what are the steps? What does it mean for an individual as a patient, me going in and taking the registry? So this is the steps to expect. First and foremost, you'll be able to register and verify your email. So once you register, you'll get an email confirmation to your email that you registered with to verify it back to that. This is part of the secure database aspect that I mentioned about earlier. And the next step would be the consent form. So there will be a consent form where you will sign. Chrissy mentioned about this as well earlier, that consenting as yourself as a patient or as a parent taking it for a minor. And then screening questions, a series of questions that will ask you, and if you're eligible to participate in the study. Now, we can get more into that in details in the upcoming, in our upcoming presentations, but just to give you an idea, it's a series of questions where we will ask to make sure you are eligible to participate in the study. And then ultimately, when you log in, you will have an opportunity to also always update your current files of information. If it's contact information, maybe there'll be different medications or history you'd like to inform in the dashboard. But the dashboard will be a series of modules where you will be able to take them. And something we want to also cover is that the modules will be presented over time. So there will be, for example, Chrissy mentioned maybe quality of life, weaning patterns of joints. We will be developing a series of modules over time. So your dashboard, again, just a reminder, is a series of your different modules, your contact information, where you can update relevant information that's more current. And then there would be an indicator of your modules that each in a particular type of registry questions. Okay.
So I'll go into a little bit about what's been done so far. The first thing, there's been a lot of meetings. I think Jeanette alluded to that earlier as well. We have had internal meetings. Alice and I have had a number of one-on-one meetings. We have had patient registry subcommittee meetings. We have presented at board meetings. We have also presented to you as the foundation, both last year and another separate event earlier this year. So there's been a lot of meetings going on. I can't neglect to mention all the meetings with the web developer, the website developer as well. Very involved meetings. Alice is a star when it comes to that. Another thing that we've done is draft a lot of documents. Anybody in research can tell you that the documentation required is staggering. There is the study protocol, which I mentioned before. All of the questionnaires are what we're calling modules in the registry itself have to be drafted, reviewed. They are reviewed by the Medical Scientific Advisory Board. Some of those members as well were really leveraging the expertise that those individuals have as researchers and doctors. You know, Alice and I feel like we're experts from a patient point of view, right? But we're not experts when it comes to the actual medical treatment, and we need guidance there. So we really do leverage them. There's the informed consent form, which we've touched on already. That document, because it describes everything about the study and how your data is being protected, is a very detailed document that will also go through the IRB review process so that that independent body can make sure it includes all the information that you'll need to see. And then I put on here IRB submission forms because it's one thing we can't neglect. There are probably about 20 individual submission forms just for a small registry study like this. That takes a lot of time to prepare. So a lot of work has been done since we last spoke to you all. Another thing to mention, so I touched on this as well already, but we did make several presentations. So we had the conference last year. We did a Meet the Co-PIs event in April this year. Had a lot of great questions from the foundation members in that event as well. Presented to the board of directors in June, and here we are in August presenting again. Registry website development and testing has been a lot of our time and effort that we have spent. Development started in January of this year, and it went really well. We even started testing it in May. And as we sort of finalize our modules, there will be more finalized testing coming before we ultimately release the registry for participants to sign up. So one of the big things that I wanted to mention to everybody that we can all celebrate is that on Thursday we submitted to the IRB. So that was a big effort. I see Jeanette clapping. This was a long time coming, so it was a big milestone to hit, and I'm really grateful for all of the time and effort that everybody has put in to make this happen, both with our subcommittee and the numerous volunteers we've had in making this come to fruition. So that submission was done on Thursday, and I believe we'll expect to hear back for approval by the end of the month. So I think Alice is going to go into a little bit about what happens next.
Very exciting. It's literally hot off the press news. So we come with that excited information to present today, and as well as the anticipation of what's next. So Chrissy covered the IRB approval expected in August, and the next thing would be the registry website testing. I'll get a little bit more information in this in a coming slide and how you can help, because it literally takes all of us, not just some or a few or many, all of us. But I'll delve more into how your participation will be very important. And then we anticipate to have a registry launch date October 1st. You'll watch your emails and we'll be able to communicate more information for you. And just bear in mind that more modules will be developed and released over time. So what you will see initially is a snapshot, and then eventually, and most importantly, like Chrissy mentioned, it's a longitudinal study. It's over time. Data is so much if it's captured at a specific snapshot, but it's even more powerful if it's a series of snapshots. And like Chrissy mentioned, your lives, and including mine, can change, whether it's bleeding patterns or certain treatments on or off or change up. So it's important, not just one off, but in continual. So bear that in mind as we continue to communicate with you in the coming weeks and months. All right. And here it is, how you can help. You know, the success and effectiveness of the patient registry doesn't just rely on the foundation or the co-principal investigators as Chrissy and myself. It relies on everyone. And I think one of the things that I communicated in our last conference, if you were able to hear, is just a patient's voice, a patient's participation, but ultimately each and every one of your voices and participation counts. So here are 4 main ways. One is volunteering to be a tester for the registry. This, as I mentioned before, it's a registry for us and by us, so it doesn't exclude us along the part of the process, including the testing. We've been fortunate to receive several volunteers who are ready to go, and they're waiting for that and launching moment where we can open it up to them first. So if you haven't had a chance before hearing it for the first time and would like to volunteer, by all means, we're going to give you our contact information as well as put it in the chat screen. So feel free to reach out. I'll be sure to include you. And again, as mentioned before, there's an NDA form, which you'll sign because you'll be a participatory in the volunteer registering testing. So we'll be sure to send you that first. And then we'll also have a training session on how to do the testing. So it's not, don't worry about not knowing what to do, where to start. We have you covered. We'll be able to give a training session on how to proceed with the testing. So that's one way. Another way is to share, spread the word. You know, the Facebook, I know a lot of us are great communications and connections on Facebook, and maybe, you know, others of type 3s that you'd like to spread the word. I think spreading the word is important. I always think about when I see a good movie, I'm running and telling my friends and my family. And I think this is that particular moment in time where we're really just gathering our community, making sure that no one's left behind and everyone's included, because each and every voice is important. And participation, the database will open soon, hopefully. And then when we do send you the launch date, we want your participation. We could build a robust database. It could be very, very big, and it can be very well, of course, confidential. But what good is a database if it doesn't have data in it? We need everyone's data. And I think that's the most important part. You know, here's our chance to actually enter our data. We go to our providers, our HTCs, and tell them about our story. Is it how and granular is it captured across the board, across the nation? This is that moment to actually capture our data from our lead logs, from our experiences, quality of life. The participation is important. An empty database is not worth a thing. We need it full registered. And donate. The foundation has been very gracious in sponsoring this, this patient registry initiative. And as Dr. Gounder mentioned earlier as well, fundraising is very important. And in any way, shape, or form, might be a car wash in your local community, might be time, but certainly there's a website, there's a link on our website and the VWD Connect Foundation, where you're able to also donate. And really, and most importantly, it's just thinking of where we were. I can speak as a patient, where I was from cryoprecipitate, even before that fresh frozen plasma, to where we are and where we're headed to. But it can't be done across the nation without your participation. And I truly, truly thank you all for your time today. We're going to leave you with the contact information, as well as put it in the chat. So if you would like to copy and paste it, that really it is for patients, by patients, and we're advancing together. We're all in step. And I can't thank you enough, Chrissy, as well, for your expertise.
Likewise, Alice. I think just one more thing I wanted to mention. I was thinking while you were sharing how our foundation members can help. One other thing is that once we do have members participating in the registry, we really want to hear your feedback as well. How are you enjoying the experience of the registry website? Are there other questions that you think would be beneficial for us as a community to delve into more? This is for patients, by patients. So we really want to get you all involved, and we want to have your feedback as well.
Great. Well, thank you both for everything. I think you are now not going to be called Alice and Chrissy, but you're going to be called the dynamic duo. You've just done incredible